With excellent motion, gunplay, and mecha combat, Titanfall 2 is a unique beast and easily one of the best games you can get for under $5. Its campaign is more than just a collection of great guns and great movement mechanics. The set pieces and level gimmicks are exceptional. The simple sci-fi rebellion storyline is primarily a backdrop for gameplay, yet it's exciting all the same. I've heard many great things about Titanfall 2's multiplayer, but my praise for this game is entirely due to its single-player campaign. Titanfall 2 delivers in spades by doing so many small things correctly. The way the user interface merges into the world, the sharp movement that gives you perfect control at all times, gunplay that, while not innovative, is always thoroughly enjoyable. This game has a tight vision with little to no waste. Altogether, Titanfall 2's campaign is an excellent experience, even for people who don't love first-person shooters. As a consequence of playing too many games on underpowered PCs over the years, I'm not a graphics snob by any means. I appreciate flashy things, but that's not what holds me in. That said, Titanfall 2 looks exceptionally good for a game of its age. Much of that comes from design and direction. They get a great mix of modern and futuristic in the guns, characters, titans, and environments. The game consistently ties impressive vistas to major moments in the story or excellent gameplay portions. Simple things like the title drop morphing into the pod drop are just so well done. When it comes to the audio, I don't particularly have anything special to really point out when it comes to music or sound effects. It's all competently done, but nothing is really amazing. However, when it comes to the voice acting, BT's voice is the star of the show. It firmly descends from the Optimus Prime tree of giant robot voices. It's something that is so expected, so cliche at this point, to be honest, and yet I can't complain at all. It's just plain cool. And to top it off, BT has almost all of the game's best lines.
I think somebody's in love.
A human's concept of love requires admiration, attraction, devotion, and respect. Conclusion: I am 50% in love.
The story is light, but so much of it is about the character relationship between Jack and BT. Broadly speaking, the story is a tried and true rebellion tale set in space. You have the overwhelming evil force against the scrappy heroic rebels. It even has a super weapon that drives much of the action. If you're above the age of 18, you've seen every single element of this story 1,000 times in 1,000 places. If you're under 18, you've seen every element 100 times in at least 100 places. And yet, it works. I enjoyed Titanfall 2's story from beginning to end because it's just another simple thing done right. When you assemble high-quality ingredients under a watchful eye, those ingredients don't have to be particularly exotic to play the role perfectly. It's like the best vanilla ice cream you've ever had. No matter how good it is, it's not a complete departure from everything you've ever experienced before, but it is something that stands out. Simply put, it's a buddy cop film where the straight-laced partner happens to be a giant robot. You've seen those individual tropes before, but that doesn't make them boring here. In my time with this game, that was the single most valuable storytelling lesson. Now, the campaign is maybe 6 hours tops. I played the entire game in 3 short sittings, and that included an hour of repeat playtime to record footage for the final mission. In its heyday, $60 would be too much for someone who just wanted to play this single-player campaign. However, if you get it on sale, it's cheaper than a matinee movie ticket. If you still have your doubts, just play it to the end of the first mission. You'll easily still be within the return window. Titanfall 2 has my favorite motion mechanics of any first-person game. It also does a great job of bringing players up to speed with a beautiful and effective tutorial level. Coming in, I already knew the game featured wall running, but I had significant doubts about how good it would feel in practice. I'm happy to report that it's both intuitive and challenging. You can definitely get it right on your first go, but you still improve throughout the game. Other mechanics such as double jumping and crouch sliding are much more straightforward. However, all of those little pieces become much more exciting once you start chaining everything together. The tutorial level concludes with the timed gauntlet, where the game uses your performance to suggest a difficulty setting. Turning to the gauntlet after beating the game, I was able to trounce my original time. I love skill progression that comes from increased skill and game knowledge as opposed to just having better weapons or stats. Now, the best part about the movement is that it gives you tremendous freedom to design your own way through the levels. And when you fall, you don't feel the game is at fault. The movement rules are established thoroughly at the beginning of the game, and they remain stable. The game subtly increments the platforming challenges, so you never completely feel out of your depth or unprepared for the task at hand. There are moments where you might be puzzled about what to do next, but even in the early goings, the game has visual traces that create ghost runners that will give you a quick in-world hint of what to do next. The vaulting mechanics are the final touch that makes movement truly great. It's a small thing, but it makes a massive difference in making characters feel more agile. Something you've seen in games like Doom, Blasphemous, and Dishonored. And honestly, I've now come to the point where I despise being able to jump but not being able to climb. It's the missing ingredient in so many games of movement mechanics. Given that the dev team had a bunch of Call of Duty veterans, it's not surprising that the guns felt great. The Volt Railgun was amongst my favorites throughout the game, and the semi-auto sniper fit my cheese-filled gameplay style. However, as the game went on, I did realize that none of the guns really stood out in an iconic way. There's nothing that rises up to the level of the chainsaw machine gun from Gears of War or the grappling hook super shotgun from Doom Eternal. That said, guns don't have to be complete originals to be fun. Whether you're poking out of cover, throwing grenades, sniping enemies right as you pull up the scope, the reality is that most shooting mechanics get their core appeal from being a first-person shooter rather than anything unique. And honestly, as much as I love complexity and novelty, that's all right with me because this game nails everything it sets out to. The Titan combat is definitely where this game chose to innovate. And it does a great directional job of teasing you with the promise of getting to pilot a Titan well before you finally get to use BT. And when you finally do get control, there's this great sense of weight behind every motion. Everything feels clunky and you get to feel the heft as it turns and as it lurches. However, you still have tremendous control. And it's this contrast between the gameplay systems where Titanfall 2 really shines. You get to have this agile, aggressive feel when you're just a pilot on foot. However, you have this just overwhelming destruction and capability, but it's also much more slow and paced once you're piloting a Titan. Titan combat is even further enhanced by special loadouts that allow for unique gameplay styles. And these Titan loadouts go a long way to mixing up the gameplay. You can bull rush your way through the game without changing anything, but it's much more fun to test out alternate loadouts when you run into trouble. And as an added bonus, there are multiple different sections throughout the game in which BT stays operational when you leave. And you can see him fighting, you can see him, beating back enemies small and large. And it's an excellent bonus that really makes the world come alive. The story overall is lightweight. It lacks any deep themes or amazing twists and turns. However, it does everything it needs to do to make gameplay sequences impactful. The pacing is excellent and there isn't much fat on any of the story's bones. This is both an asset and a detriment. The intro video does a good job of setting the stage for the gameplay and story because it basically tells you that, hey, this uses tropes that you've seen everywhere all the time. Now, there are these soft dialogue choices throughout the game that give Cooper a little more personality, though I wish there were some branches to actually make these choices count. The illusion of choice is probably the only thing worse than not having a choice at all. There are so many good things that can be said about the level design throughout the game. However, I'll focus most of my conversation points around the first level, just because this is a short game and most of its real surprise comes from interacting with interesting level gimmicks and mechanics. In the first level, Lastimosa isn't enough of a character for his death to matter, but it's also a point that the game is decisive about what it wants to be. It's not going to linger on that moment because it knows you've known him for all of 30 seconds. This is a game that is not afraid to be shallow when it needs to be in order to keep the pace exciting and electric. That's something that actually leads to a large amount of the positives of this game coming in such a small time. Because you're jumping from one excellent sequence to another. Levels build with bit by bit by bit, go through different phases, and it's fun the whole way around. For all the game's focus on running and gunning, the game does allow a small hint of stealth via a cloaking mechanic that's somewhat similar to a Crisis. Now, I'm a cheeser at heart, so I had tons of fun in the early goings with the cloak and volt gun combo. However, Titanfall 2 is truly at its best when you're running and gunning. Advanced movement mechanics directly lead to large and expansive map design. And those expansive maps open the door for ambushes, zip lines, alternate ways of traversal, and small encampments. In the first mission alone, you get a healthy dose of on-foot combat with various weapons and enemy types. In one more platforming and exposition-filled section, you even get to feel cool by hunting for a battery through an exploding ship. The game often uses platforming segments as areas for BT and Jack to have banter and develop their characters together. This little sequence also establishes a nice promise and payoff between meeting BT and actually getting to pilot him as a Titan. Even if you quickly get to the meat of this game, you have to earn it, and I love that design concept. As you get through BT's explanations of how to fight with a Titan, it fits into the game's story and the world. And all of this climaxes with a Titan duel that really leaves you feeling like you're playing the right game. The separate phases of the intro mission slowly ramp up in intensity and train you to play the game well at the same time. Early on, I played very cautiously, and looking back at my footage, I can really see how it's wildly different from the start to the end of the game. It fits with the character because in the beginning you're going to play slow as a rifleman, but by the end you genuinely feel like a pilot and you'll be running and gunning and sliding your way through every battle. This game, it really ultimately just does such a good job of giving you all the tools up front, but then slowly training you so that you can really feel your character's progression in line with the story. I often say that character is best exposed via gameplay, and this is a sterling example of that. Altogether, Titanfall 2 is a game that soars because of its excellent level design, great movement mechanics, and fun combat whether on foot or in a Titan. The levels are designed with great phases that give you a natural momentum as you alternate between Titan and on-foot combat. The movement system is so well put together that pure platforming sections remain a thrill. And to top it all off, everything is completely skill-based. You stumble and bumble in early levels, but you'll be flying around, wall running, and getting headshots like a psychopath by the mid-game. The progression is so natural that it's shocking. And many of the best missions are in the middle of the game, with one level's gimmick being so well thought out that it's simply too cool to talk about. Coming into the heart of this game blind is an absolute treat. After playing the game, you might scoff and tell me that you've seen 10 other examples of the same things in other shooter campaigns. That may be true, but Titanfall 2 is completely confident in its goal of being a simple thing done right. I highly recommend this game, even if you never touched the multiplayer. It's a tremendous value on sale, regularly dropping as low as $3. I enjoyed it from beginning to end and have nothing bad to say about the experience. Titanfall 2 is a lovely reminder that not everything needs to be novel to be a blast. Sometimes the best course of action is to innovate on one or two angles and then do all the small things to absolute perfection. As always, everything I do is sponsored by yours truly, so you can support my work by buying my work via links in the description or in my About page. My latest novel is titled Coordinated Universal Time Travel, and I'm also working on an African fantasy action adventure series called Lord of Vipers. I'll tell you more about that one soon.